Hi, so I'm Sara, and we're here in the central bus station in Rishon, Letzion, asking some questions to local Israelis to get their state of the union, kind of, but in Israel. And the questions that we're going to be asking today are the two that we want to focus on across the demographic are what are the greatest strengths and what are the greatest challenges of Israeli society. And then we'll ask a couple people what do they need to achieve peace with the Palestinians if they were in Congress, or in the Knesset, what could they do? And then maybe we'll get to the Haredi draft law with a few people. Those are where we're focusing today.
מה את חושבת על עיתונות אידיאולוגית הגלית? אנחנו עם גדול, אנחנו כל הזמן ביחד. כן, זה בסדר. זה בסדר. מצוינת. כן. ואז, מה הבעיות גדולות? יש הרבה בעיות. דיור, עבודה, כל מיני דברים. העיקר נראה לי זה היתר מחיה. זה החשוב. טוב. ובשבילך, מה את צריכה בשביל שלום עם פלסטינאים? שהם הבינו אותנו, אנחנו נבין אותם. כן. אוקיי. חשוב.
Alright, so we met with Mordechai, a Mizrahi elderly Jew, while we were in the central bus station in Rishon, Letzion. Because of some technical difficulties, his video is lost to the interwebs somewhere. So I'm going to try and summarize what we talked to him about. The first question we asked him was, what do you think the greatest strengths of Israel are, the Israeli society? And once he figured out what we were asking, he immediately responded with, it's the Jewish people, Am Echad. And then we asked, okay, so what are the greatest challenges of Israeli society? And he chuckled as he said that we don't think about the Israeli people, the Jewish people. We think about where we are in our chair and with our possessions, and we're very centered on ourselves. We don't think about anybody who's out there in the rest of the world. And then we asked him about the Haredi draft bill. And when I first asked, he just heard draft bill. And it said, I went to the army. What are you asking? Of course I went to the army. And then we asked, well, the new Haredi draft bill, and he just heard Haredi that time. I don't like the Haredi. We feed them, we pay for them, just so that they can sit in their chairs and study in yeshiva. They don't do anything. And now they're complaining they don't want to go to the army and help protect the rest of us. I have to go protect them because they're sitting in yeshiva all day. I don't like the Haredi. That's what we learned from Mordechai.
So we are standing here in a square in Rishon Letzion, and there is a large, what looks like Ethiopian population here. We had a couple of interesting experiences where we asked some Ethiopian women who were dressed very modestly whether they were interested in answering 3 short questions for this movie, and they all seemed okay for a bit. And then they were, as soon as they figured out that we were filming them, they were very uncomfortable and said no and walked away, which is really interesting. It looks like this is an area that is alternately Mizrahi and Ethiopian. So there's an interesting blend of people that seem to be around here. We have a couple of pictures of the area that are going to follow this in the video.
So, coming down from that day last week when we went to Rishon Letzion, we just wanted to talk about what we experienced that day and kind of how it fits into our story of Israel Seminar.
And I think one of the things that Sara had mentioned were that we had some expectations walking in that were fulfilled and not fulfilled in a couple of different ways.
I don't know if they were expectations as of really like a lack of knowledge of what to expect and then surprising results from that. So I honestly didn't know much about Rishon Letzion, and then to walk from the central bus station to Neve Eliyahu, there's a stark contrast in the populations that were present there. I just wasn't expecting that to start to that.
Right, and I mean, you literally go from Smallville, where you look on your map and it says neighborhood under construction, and it's obviously a more like upper middle class to upper class neighborhood with, you know, high rises and things like that, into this very small, older, low neighborhood, much more akin to like a rural area almost, and it's full of Ethiopian, what you might think are refugees, because they're dressing traditionally and they're speaking Ethiopian to each other. Amharic, sorry, thank you. They're speaking to each other in Amharic, and it feels like they're not as integrated.
It feels like another world.
Yeah, it does. It really did feel like another world, and I think we were really surprised by some of the reactions that we got from there. Although, you know, in context with Israeli society, in the place of the Ethiopian population in Israeli society, it does fit. So that was interesting to see kind of in the wild, without any sort of additional needed context for that, especially after the day that we had with the Ethiopian woman who talked to us about how many of these people, even though they've been here for a generation or two, still have not fully integrated. And we saw a little bit of that kind of firsthand, which was quite interesting.
And one of the other things that was interesting was that both Mordechai and Marina said that the greatest strength of Israel was that we are one Jewish people. And I'm curious if the Ethiopians, had we been able to talk to them, would have said the same thing. If that would have been their immediate gut reaction, saying we are one Jewish people. And judging by the way they're living and how they seem separate from the rest of the Israeli society around them, I don't know that it would be. Although it may be because they came here to live in Israel, maybe it motivated. I don't know.
Yeah, no, so that would have been an interesting conversation to have, but unfortunately we weren't able to have that conversation. So, yeah, I think those were our big kind of takeaways from this. The Ethiopian community in Rishon Letzion seems very, very, I mean, yes, it is slightly more insular, but it also seems very, very strong. They had their own spaces in the park, and they really did have a very, very strong tequila there that I think I was surprised to see. They weren't hiding until we asked them to video them, and in which case things were different. But that seemed to be a thread through a lot of the other conversations that we heard about that same day in other places. So
it was an interesting experience, and I would be willing to do it again somewhere else.
Yeah.